the Chinese government is trying with increasing ferocity to use its economic and diplomatic clout to silence critical voices abroad and to undermine global institutions that protect human rights. China has obviously long censored critics at home. The government is now trying to extend that censorship to the rest of the world.
Oh, Kenneth Roth there. Hong Kong is just one of the focal points of China's repression. Activists there are saying Beijing is using the territory's police to enforce a policy of ever greater brutality. But support for the Communist Party's line among the police in Hong Kong is not universal. Some are risking their jobs or worse by speaking out. DW's Matthias Böhlinger filed this report.
When David Chan joined the Hong Kong police force a few years ago, he never thought that he would see scenes like these. David Chan is not his real name. This was last November when protesters and police clashed for hours on a university campus. Hong Kong police had come under massive attack. And David says it's not only the physical threats that affect morale.
They've been working long hours. They've been blamed, fingers pointed at them. It's very exhausting, both physically and mentally.
This is what he's talking about. Hong Kongers criticizing and often cursing at the police. Many officers are on edge. They've been accused of indiscriminate arrests, beating up subdued protesters and threatening to shoot tear gas into apartments. Videos of alleged police brutality are circulating online. Bystanders who get into arguments with officers risk getting pepper sprayed, a clear violation of the rules as David learned them.
I'm just frustrated because some officers really dislike the protesters, and honestly, they really want to beat them up. But I think this isn't the right mentality. We should be impartial as police officers. We shouldn't take sides.
He says he's currently doing as much as 100 hours of overtime every month. While he isn't serving at the front line, as backup he often has to be at the site of demonstrations. David is hiding his identity for fear of being bullied by protesters online, and he worries about professional repercussions.
As a member of the Hong Kong police force, I shouldn't be criticizing it in public. But as a citizen of Hong Kong, I have to say, the senior officers have basically messed it up.
Officials deny the police have done anything wrong. The police has been in the focus of the demonstrators since June, when they first violently broke up a protest. Since then, public anger has steadily grown, especially among the young. David says most of his friends have turned their back on him in the past 6 months.
I was a bit upset about it, because they were my good friends. But then I thought about it. There's nothing I can do.
He says several of his colleagues have quit their jobs, but while he's at odds with the current tactics, he has no intention to leave.
I should be staying in the police force and try to maintain the right mentality and to uphold the values of the police.
It's a tough challenge for David, stuck between loyalty and doubt.
Let's go now straight to Beijing and DW's Matthias Böhlinger for more about that new human rights report about China's oppression and suppression of human rights. Good day to you, Matthias. Can you fill us in on some of the report's details that shows China working for, quote, a dystopian future at home and abroad?
Well, we have just seen one example of China's repression, which is Hong Kong, where human rights organizations have accused China and the Hong Kong police and the Hong Kong government that is dependent on China of restricting the previously quite liberal freedoms of the city. There are, of course, the very grim examples of the suppression of Uighurs, where we are seeing the biggest internment of an ethnic group probably since the end of World War II and the massive surveillance state that has been installed in the Xinjiang region, but increasingly also throughout China. We have seen increasing arrests during the past few years of human rights activists, wide-use torture, etc., etc., etc. All this is not new. What the report now details about is the mechanisms that China is using to suppress criticism abroad, outside of China.
This is probably the most disturbing part of the report, certainly for people abroad. Where does Human Rights Watch consider China's threat to human rights overseas most severe? Is there a specific area?
Well, one of the groups, for example, that have really been targeted are the Uighurs abroad. They have been threatened abroad. They have been their family members have disappeared, and all of this was used to suppress their criticism. Chinese groups of pro-government supporters have been mobilized, for example, on universities across the world to counter protests against China's human rights record, and there has also been pressure on the human rights mechanisms, the international human rights mechanisms, as well as on countries that are financially dependent on China to support China's oppression policies, for example, in Xinjiang.
Okay, now this report also says that China's leadership is, quote, scared of its own people. Is that the sense that you have from your time reporting in China?
Brian, this is a very tough question because we need to be careful with public opinion in China. We do not have any surveys. We know that all kinds of opinions exist, and but we do not really know to what extent they are represented in the population. What we have seen, however, and this is something that I would support, that whenever news are leaked, whenever there have been investigative reports, and there have been more in the past when press control was less strict, about abuses of power, public reaction immediately is there, and the public anger builds up very quickly. So what we can clearly say is that this system of governance in China would not be able, the power of the Communist Party would definitely not survive in the way it is exercised now without this massive repression and this massive censorship.
DW's Matthias Böhlinger. Matthias, thanks so very much for bringing us up to date on this new report.